Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Hassan-Nahoum.
In our top story, the IDF's operation to root out terror leaders from the last Hamas stronghold of Rafah has begun. The Israeli War Cabinet has approved the offensive against the terror group in Gaza's southernmost city, and IDF armored brigades have advanced on the Hamas-controlled enclave. Analysts believe that most of the remaining Hamas leadership is hiding in tunnels under Rafah and that many of the hostages are being held there. Israel dropped leaflets calling on civilians to evacuate Rafah and erected a tent city to house them near Khan Yunis. The 401st Armored Brigade advanced on and secured the Rafah crossing on the border with Egypt and raised the Israeli flag on the critical passageway. The Egyptian military has bolstered its presence along the border in order to prevent civilians from entering the Sinai. Last month, Cairo mobilized tanks and armored personnel carriers to the area, and last week, dozens of Gazans were confronted by the Egyptian armed forces and forced to turn back to the Hamas-run Gaza Strip.
The administration of U.S. President Joe Biden knew that a ceasefire proposal submitted to Hamas had been altered, and Biden did not inform Israel of the changes. The Axios News Service reported that the White House was aware that Egypt and Qatar had amended the proposal and withheld the information from the Jewish state. Israeli officials were shocked when the Iranian-backed terror group agreed to terms that Jerusalem had not submitted. Several high-ranking Israelis said they were not aware of, nor had they seen the document in question. The proposal did not meet any of Israel's key demands, and they accused the terror group of creating a ruse to paint Israel as the obstinate party in the negotiations. A statement released by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the latest offer is far from reaching Israel's essential requirements, but that Jerusalem would continue negotiating with mediators for the release of the hostages.
The Biden administration has admitted that it is intentionally stalling shipments of weapons purchased by Israel in order to pressure the Jewish state to comply with Washington's demands against the military offensive against Hamas in Rafah. The Wall Street Journal has reported that the sale of Mk-82 bombs, fuses, and joint direct attack munition guidance kits, which enable bombs to become precision-guided, have been repeatedly delayed. The Biden administration has also refused to advance the sale of $1 billion worth of tank munitions, military vehicles, and mortar rounds to Israel as it fights the Hamas terror group in Gaza. President Biden spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last week and reiterated his opposition to a major operation in the last Hamas stronghold of Rafah. And the White House confirmed that the weapons are being held out of concern that they would be used in the Gazan city.
The Hamas-run Gaza Ministry of Health has been accused of greatly inflating the number of Palestinian civilians killed in the war with Israel. Since the beginning of the conflict, the total non-combatants killed was highly suspicious. The Foundation for the Defense of Democracies reported that Hamas is unable to provide information on at least one-third of those it claims are deceased. In April, the Hamas Health Ministry released a report claiming that 34,000 people had been killed by Israel, but noted that it could identify only 24,000. The IDF reported that of the 24,000 killed since October 7th, more than 14,000 were terrorists. The Washington-based think tank said this is the first admission that Hamas lacks the essential data point necessary to establish that these deaths have occurred. Experts have doubted the validity of the casualty statistics of Hamas since the beginning of the war and accused the terror group of greatly inflating the death toll to gain international sympathy. Analysts believe once the actual number of casualties are verified, Israel's operation in Gaza will go down in history as one of the most humane conflicts in modern urban warfare.
The United States House of Representatives has overwhelmingly passed a resolution to adopt the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. Bill H.R. 6090 will require the U.S. education system to use the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of anti-Semitism, known as IRA. Jewish groups throughout the United States applauded the formal adoption of the IRA definition and urged the Senate to advance the legislation swiftly. The passage of this important bipartisan bill comes as anti-Semitism has skyrocketed globally. Yochanan has more on that.
Yes, Rebecca, the number of anti-Semitic hate crimes has spiked, prompting Jews to fear for their safety. Violent pro-Palestinian demonstrations have been held on university campuses in the United States and around the world, and in some cases, the agitators have prevented Jewish students from attending classes. A recent study published by Tel Aviv University and the Anti-Defamation League reflects that anti-Semitic events nearly quadrupled in France. It noted that the United States saw a 103% rise in anti-Jewish incidents. The report warns that this increase could threaten Jewish life in the West.
Dozens of American lawmakers have warned the International Criminal Court against issuing arrest warrants for senior Israeli officials. The GOP senators cautioned that the arrest warrants would align the ICC with Iran, which is the largest state sponsor of terrorism, and its proxy, Hamas. In a letter written to ICC Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan, the senators stated that the ICC is attempting to punish Israel for taking legitimate actions of self-defense against the Iranian-backed aggressors. They added that such attacks are illegitimate and lack legal basis, and if carried out, they will result in severe sanctions against Khan and the ICC. The document goes on to say there is no moral equivalence between Hamas's terrorism and Israel's justified response, and warned that if Khan moves forward with the measures, the senators will move to end all American support for the ICC, sanction its employees and associates, and bar Khan and his family from the United States. Senator Tom Cotton, who penned the letter, concluded by saying, "You have been warned. Target Israel, and we will target you."
Shireen Haskell, the co-chairperson of the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus, addressed British lawmakers on the role of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency in the Israel-Hamas conflict and on Iran's recent attack on the Jewish state. Haskell briefed members of Parliament and the House of Lords. She also spoke to students at Oxford University and the Pinsker Center. Haskell said Israel and the United Kingdom must collaborate closely regarding UNRWA's role in the Israel-Hamas conflict and Iran's aggression. Dialogue and cooperation are essential to tackle these challenges effectively. She added that the alarming rise of anti-Semitism on university campuses calls for decisive action and civil discourse.
Member of Knesset Matan Kahana and representatives from the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus joined hundreds of Jews and Christians in Stuttgart, Germany for the March of Life on Holocaust Remembrance Day. Kahana spoke at the Parliament in Stuttgart on the global surge of anti-Semitism, saying, "We must stand united in unequivocal condemnation, for when anti-Semitism is allowed to flourish unchecked, it paves the way for the darkest chapters in human history to repeat themselves." Josh Reinstein, the president of the Israel Allies Foundation, said, "We are honored to join forces with the March of Life and the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem to remember the atrocities of the Holocaust and to commit to standing with the Jewish state of Israel." He said, as the forces of evil once again gather against the Jewish people, our Christian allies have made it clear that we are not alone.
Sirens will sound throughout Israel on Sunday night as the country collectively mourns its fallen soldiers and victims of terror attacks. Yom HaZikaron is the day that Israel sets aside to honor the memories of soldiers killed in action and citizens murdered in terrorist attacks. This year is especially difficult as the nation is still grieving the loss of more than 1,200 people murdered by Hamas terrorists on October 7th, over 260 soldiers killed in battle in the ensuing war, and more than 130 hostages still held captive in Gaza. Official memorial services will begin Sunday night with a 1-minute siren as the country pauses to remember those who have paid the ultimate price for our freedom. All restaurants and places of entertainment will be closed. On Monday, memorial services will be held as Israel observes the National Day of Mourning.
After marking the pain that our nation has endured, the state of Israel will go from sadness to joy. As the sun sets on Yom HaZikaron this Monday night, Israelis will begin celebrating 76 years of an independent Jewish state. 2,000 years of exile ended when the Jewish people were restored to their homeland on the 5th day of the Hebrew month of Iyar, which coincided with May 14, 1948, on the civil calendar. The prophet Ezekiel said, "I will take you out of the nations. I will gather you from all the countries and bring you back to your land." The state of Israel is a modern miracle and a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. Children once again play in the streets of Jerusalem as Zechariah prophesied, and just as Isaiah promised, God has made the barren deserts of Israel bloom. We at Israel Now News would like to wish all of our viewers a Yom Ha'atzmaut Sameach.
Happy Israeli Independence Day! That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. We're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Fleur Hassan. She's the Special Envoy for Innovation. Fleur, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Josh. Great being here.
So tell our viewers a little about what does the Special Envoy for Innovation do?
So that's a great question. And of course, everything's changed in the last few months. But essentially, the idea is that I'm kind of like a roving ambassador for bringing innovation opportunities for Israel and Israel bringing its innovation to the world. We're looking at countries in the Arab world. We're looking at countries in Africa, countries that could really do it, a real added value, Israel's innovation for their own growth.
Well, you're a well-known entity in Israel. You were the deputy mayor of Jerusalem. You're a big spokesperson for the state. You're all over the media and, of course, with the innovation as well. How do you see Israel change since October 7th?
I think we've lost our innocence in the sense that nobody really believed that the atrocities that we saw on October 7th would happen in our own country, in our own sovereign state. And then add insult to injury to see the way many of communities around the world have reacted to it, blaming the victim, which is what we've seen over the last few months, and just anti-Semitism going to rates that we never thought we'd seen. Unfortunately, we all know we're in that era that every generation of Jews goes through of uncontrolled Jew hatred around the world. And we just have to continue to fight. We know that the truth is with us. We know that we're a country that not only solves our own problems, but we also invent things to solve problems around the world. And this is why the innovation role is so important.
We've seen that nation after nation is being turned against Israel. We just went through October 7th. We're in the middle of a war.
Yeah.
Yet I see people really coming together. I see optimism. We were just rated the 5th happiest country in the world. How do you explain it?
That's actually very interesting because you know that we were very deeply divided on October 6th. We were fighting the whole last year. We were fighting over constitutional reform, for, against. And then October 7th happened and we realized that we actually have real enemies and that the enemy is not within. The enemy is coming from outside. And this has always been in the history of the Jewish people. And so we have an obligation to come together in our moments of need. We have an obligation to move forward as a country together.
This week is a very interesting week. We always have our Yom HaZikaron, our Remembrance Day, and then immediately after it, our Independence Day celebration. How do you think it's going to work this year? You know, so many people are mourning. It's such a hard time. Do you think we'll be able to really turn gears and go into a celebration of Independence Day in such a hard time?
I'm not sure. I mean, look, the beauty of the Jewish people is that we always know how to put things side by side. We know how to memorialize the tragedies of the past, but we also are people that are not stuck in the past. We always look to the future and we live in the present. And that's why we are the 5th happiest country in the world. We're the 5th happiest country in the world because it's our values that keep us together, values of family, values of community. We are a country that doesn't have loneliness like other countries have. That's why we're the happiest country, because the most important thing in life is community and family, and that we have an abundance of. Having said that, when we still have hostages in dungeons in Gaza that are basically being managed by terrorists, I'm not sure how we can make that transition to a full celebration. If anything, it'll be a celebration, but it'll be a very toned-down celebration this year.
During our Independence Day, which is in the next couple days, the secret character, like in the story of Purim, is always God. You know, it's God that brought us here. It's God that brought us together. During this time, since October 7th, we've seen a lot of people coming back to God, coming back to the traditions of Judaism. How does that play into things?
In times of need, we also see the miracles in small things. And we learn to appreciate what we have when we've seen the vicious attack that we've had on us. And I think that people are turning to God for help, for inspiration, for guidance. God intervenes in certain moments in our history, sometimes in an open way and sometimes in a hidden way, like the story of Purim that we just celebrated a month ago. And so we pray, we continue to pray, because that is the hope of the Jewish people.
Back to innovation, something amazing is happening in our economy. It's actually super strong during
Yes.
wartime. Our currency is strong against the dollar. How? How is this happening?
Well, even if you look at the last quarter of 2023, you see that after the initial shock of investors, you see an incredible influx of billions of dollars of investment into the country. And then, you know what Israel is like? From every tragic, terrible situation, we also find opportunity. So all of the different technology that we're developing now to deal with the things that happened to us on October 7th, so they don't happen again, now they're being pivoted into what we call dual-use technologies, military technologies that can also be flipped into technologies in civilian life. And that is really the incredible thing about Israel. Even our own tragedy, we turn into an opportunity, not just for our country, but an opportunity to bring light to the world.
You talk about our opportunity through being the high-tech nation. A lot of countries are coming to Israel for technology, and even the idea of peace with Saudi Arabia comes from the idea that they want also some of the high-tech that we have. How important is our high-tech industry?
Our high-tech industry is not only a significant employer in the country, but it is the main driver of wealth in the country and of foreign investment. And so it's crucial. But what's interesting is, and a lot of people who invested in the country are saying, the Israelis, even in the wartime, didn't stop delivering the products. Even though a big chunk of our workforce was basically fighting in the front lines, somehow we still made it happen.
Fleur, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
Well, your particular audience, Josh, I want to thank the evangelical community, the global evangelical community, for standing with Israel at a most difficult moment when the whole world is turning their back on Israel. The evangelical leaders and the evangelical public is coming to Israel and is standing with Israel. And when you face the cold shoulder of many people around the world, to have the warmth of the evangelical community is something that we will never forget.
Thank you, Fleur, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, wishing you a happy Israeli Independence Day. Now back to the studio.
And now the truth from Zion.
The Boko Haram jihadist group has terrorized Nigeria since its founding in 2002. Boko Haram, literally translated, means Westernization is sacrilege, referring to the group's rejection of modern society and secular education. Also known as the Nigerian Taliban, this terror army's credo is holy war or jihad. This radical Sunni faction of Islamic extremists has waged war against Christians, Shiite Muslims, and Nigerian civil servants in an attempt to overthrow the government and establish an Islamic state ruled by strict Sharia law. The group's founder, Muhammad Yusuf, instituted a bloody campaign of attacks. He was killed by security forces in 2009. After his death, the group remained inactive until Yusuf's deputy, Abu Bakr Shekau, released a video declaring his leadership over Boko Haram. Shekau ordered a series of assassinations and terrorist attacks to assert his control. On Christmas Eve of 2010, Boko Haram terrorists laid siege to 2 churches and detonated explosives in Christian neighborhoods. In 2011, a suicide bomber attacked a United Nations building, killing 23 people. The Boko Haram campaign of terror became more coordinated and more sophisticated. In 2012, simultaneous attacks on the city of Kano claimed the lives of 185 people. Boko Haram has taken over northeastern Nigeria by raping, pillaging, burning, and destroying any community that does not conform to its beliefs. Boko Haram has preyed on the innocent Christian population of Africa, making them the victims of a holy war against the infidels. It views Western education as a sin and has justified the slaughter of hundreds of teachers and students. This Islamic terrorist group operates in Nigeria, Chad, Niger, northern Cameroon, and Mali. Its fanatic interpretation of Islam allows terrorists free rein to slay anyone who does not declare Muhammad as the prophet and Sunni Islam as the supreme religion. The Vatican estimates that more than 50,000 Christians have been martyred by the Islamic terror group since it began in 2009. The Vatican also claims the radical Islamic group has torched more than 1,800 churches across the West African nation. Experts refer to the slaughter of the Christians in Africa as the silent genocide due to the Western world's inaction for the plight of their Christian African brothers and sisters. The murder of Christians in Africa is happening on a daily basis, but many do not know that it is occurring because these massacres are often ignored by the international news media. The Christians of Africa have suffered immensely under the reign of terror by Boko Haram, which is mainly funded by kidnapping schemes, bank robberies, and extortion. Open Doors is a Christian nonprofit organization that attempts to raise awareness of the plight of persecuted Christians around the world. It notes that Nigeria has become the epicenter of targeted violence against the church. Nearly half of Nigeria's population is Christian, but the Islamic population has asserted dominance over them. Christians are treated as dhimmis or second-class citizens. While some Christian groups have attempted to raise awareness of the plight of Nigerian Christians, others do nothing because they lack any knowledge of the situation. But this is little comfort to Nigerian Christians, whose children are being kidnapped by Islamic gunmen and sold into slavery. In 2014, Boko Haram abducted 200 Nigerian schoolgirls and announced that they would become slaves. It also declared an Islamic caliphate in areas of Nigeria under its control. It was at this point the group broke ties with Al-Qaeda and officially pledged allegiance to the Islamic State terror group. They continued to attack and enslave innocents in a desperate attempt to widen their control of the country, striking fear into the hearts of all Nigerians and humanitarian aid workers. Amnesty International has estimated that more than 2,000 civilians are being held captive as the terrorist group wages its relentless campaign of killings, abductions, and looting. More Christians are killed for their faith in Nigeria than in all other countries of the world combined. The people of Israel know this barbarism all too well.
Hamas attacks Jews in Israel, while Boko Haram attacks Christians in Africa. But their aim for Islamic domination is the same.
What Islam calls the people of the book are under attack around the world. Jews and Christians need to stand together to defend their shared Judeo-Christian values. Up next, the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
I want to tell you that this is the day when the church needs to stand with Israel, like Moses, like Aaron, like her, on the mountain to pray for a clear victory of Israel against those forces of darkness.
Since 1980, the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem has been a voice of Christian support for Israel and connected the global church to the land of the Bible. Headquartered in Jerusalem, the ICEJ has taken action to stand with Israel by caring for Holocaust survivors, helping Jewish families return home to Israel, providing bomb shelters, fighting anti-Semitism around the world, and by inviting Christians to discover Israel for themselves.
Dear friends, I'm coming to you from the Gaza envelope, from Kibbutz Be'eri, the place that probably was worst hit by those atrocities of October 7. 10% of the population of this kibbutz were killed, mutilated, raped, and it was a day where the president of Israel said it was the darkest day in the history of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Now, the Word of God tells us that the battle in which we are engaging, it is not a battle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers in the heavenly places. And what we have seen in Kibbutz Be'eri was a demonic manifestation of the spirit of Amalek. It was hitting people that were peace-loving residents of this community, like the following story.
כן, הבית הזה גרה פה ויויאן, שהייתה פעילת שלום, שבאה מקנדה, אין יותר ממנה, הייתה מסיעה, אנשים עד לעזה, היו אוכלים אצלה, שותים, ופה היא מצאה את מותה. פשוט לא שרפו לה את הבית ורצחו אותה. ומה שאני אומר, חמאס, דאעש, נאצים, הם לא בוחלים, אין חברים. הם רוצים להרוג את כל היהודים ואת כל הנוצרים בעולם, זה האמונה שלהם וזה מה שהם רוצים.
What you hear here, it's a rebirth of the spirit of Amalek in our time. I don't think this spirit of Amalek, of hating the Jews, wanting to annihilate the Jewish people, were more powerful manifested than on October 7. I want to call upon our prayer partners from around the world to understand, even though you see the physical destruction of that house, we are not waging a physical war. Our fight is not against flesh and blood, but against demonic powers that are operating over there in Gaza with organizations like Hamas, like Islamic Jihad, that have one target: to annihilate the Jewish people. This spirit needs to be addressed in prayer. We need you to speak out to your communities about the atrocities that were taking place here in this land. And it's a time where the church needs to wake up, where they need to stand up. Not only confessions are enough today, where we say we love Israel, but actions are needed. Today, a praying church is being needed around the world. Please join our various prayer initiatives, either the global prayer gathering, the Rosh Chodesh prayer, 24/7 campaign. Israel needs today your prayer more than ever. Thank you so much for standing with us, and I look forward to see you and to welcome you in one of our prayer meetings. God bless you here from the envelope of Gaza.
After Hamas brutally attacked Israel on October the 7th, 2023, the ICEJ has been actively standing with Israel and her people through advocacy and urgently needed aid projects. Now is the time for Christians to turn their love for Israel and the Jewish people into real action as never before. Your donation will help deliver bomb shelters to at-risk areas, provide necessary supplies for first responders, care for evacuees with food, shelter, clothing, and trauma care, and will eventually help rebuild these devastated communities. Visit ICEJUSA.tv to donate online or call 1-800-910-6355 and give your generous gift today.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan Elrom, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.